Hey y'all, welcome back to the Nomadic Nurse Podcast, where we talk about all of the above. We talk about nursing, we talk about health, mentorship, business, faith. We talk about all of the above with glory from the God from up above. In Jesus' name, amen. And we are going to talk about, again, a very important topic. I heard a quote today where it really got to me. I'm going to tell you a little bit of my moment last night too, when I was trying to film this episode. But this morning I was eating and all was good until at one point I, felt a little bit anxious. And I told myself last night, I'm like, I need to put you first. Like, when I make these, when I would do these podcast episodes and whatnot. And last night I was about to do the episode and I'm like, I'm looking at the content schedule and I'm kind of like, okay, but the other stuff is not ringing to me right now. And I was like, I'll focus on the content schedule. But then I was like, no, it's not ringing with me. So I stopped and I said, okay, we're going to do something different. I said, let me pray before. At first I was like, let me go on ChatGPT and find it. I was like, no, let me pray before. So I stopped. I pray, I put on some worship music. I do it for about 30 minutes to an hour. And keep in mind, I was already in podcast mode gear. I was wearing this actual outfit, and then the camera was heating up. The camera was heating up, and I said, okay, well, let's not let this overheat. And then while I get that to rest, I'll go have a little snack or something. And if there's anything that I know, is that I don't go, I used to professionally dance, right? And I did competitive dancing and, for years and years. If there's anything that you don't do is eat with your costume on. I ate with my costume on. Guess what happened? My outfit. And I was making cucumbers with soy sauce, sesame oil, garlic salt, and thyme. Put that all in, had a good little bite, got a good crunch. Soy sauce and sesame oil, juices, seasoning went all over me. Yep. So this went straight in the wash. I cleaned it up as best as I can. And I think I did a pretty good job. And then, lo and behold, I have to wait for the washer because the washer and dryer is right back there. And I have to, once that washer and dryer's done, get back to this. And then I started to pray. Says, okay, let's pray this out. Let's figure this out. I pray it out. And as soon as I'm about to click record, a knock on my door, and it's my landlord. And keep in mind, I'm in Nova Scotia, I'm on a travel nurse contract, and I've been waiting to get my mail. So my landlord pulled up, and he's like, oh, here's your mail keys. I'm like, yay. Got a moment, managed to sit and chat with him a little bit. And what was so interesting, I was able to take the time to minister. And one of the prayers that I made was, God, let thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven in this podcast. Let this navigate. And God actually said, all right, let thy will be done. Minister to this man. Are you going to put your podcast aside to minister to this man? And it's so funny because as soon as he came in and he gave me the keys, I'm like, hey, you want a coffee? Picking up the Nova Scotia way, right? Because that's a lot of the people here in Nova Scotia are so nice. And I'm like, hey, have a coffee. And he sat down, got chatting, we chatted about a couple things. And it was just so nice because I was able to minister to him and I was able to say a couple of words of encouragement. And it was just really, really nice. And I'm happy I took that opportunity in that moment. And I didn't idolize my podcast. Be like, okay, well, I have to film by. I took the moment and ministered. And after he left, I felt so good. I felt so good about it. Because I'm like, I think I passed the test. God, did I pass the test? And he was like, girl, you passed the test. So now we're here. And as I'm eating, I'm getting ready to do the podcast, learn my lesson, with the shirt. And I am watching an Instagram reel, and I found this amazing quote that this girl said. And let me just make sure I quote it properly. Oh, yeah. What burdens you is what God has called you to lead. When I heard that on that reel, when I heard that, music to my ears, because I have been really, really touched by this topic. I've been really touched about this topic, and it's, of course, as you know it, I've mentioned it in several podcast episodes at this point. Well, the several that I have, it's burnout. Burnout really touches my soul. It burdens me. In all transparency, the topic of burnout burdens me. And what do I mean by burden? As much as I may be past it in many ways, it is a topic that I hold extremely close, because it has happened to me several times for several different reasons outside and inside of working as a nurse. And it is, today we're talking about it in a context of hope. We're talking about it in a context of restoration. There is restoration after a burnout. There is. There is a reason why we go through these things. And it's not because God's punishing you. It's because you have fallen into your own understanding. You have fallen into the trap of your flesh. You have fallen into this way of being the Messiah in other people's lives a lot of the times. You have fallen into the trap of the things that you've seen, you've been through in your day-to-day, and you haven't dealt with it. Burnout can look so different to many, many people, and it comes in different ways. However, when we become apathetic, for me, I've had that sign of burnout. I've also had the sign of burnout where I was hyper emotional. And there were two different occasions. You're either super apathetic or beyond empathetic. And there's nothing in between. So it's hyper emotional or completely no emotions at all. And when you start crossing into those lanes, and you forget the fact that you have emotions in between there, normal, regular, human emotions that God has given you to use as signals, feelings to be used as signals, and we start to misinterpret them heavily or not use them properly, that's when we realize that we're in a burnout. So I want to give you the verse of the episode today, which is Isaiah 43 verse 2. And that reads, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and the rivers will not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be scorched, and the flame will not burn you." Amen. This is in the context of the restoration of Israel that was put into exile in the book of Isaiah. And the biggest thing is when you get into the prophets is that they talk a lot about idolatry and Israel's fall to idolatry, seeing that Israel, and again, we're talking Israelites in this time, right? So we're talking about Israel falling into idolatry. What is idolatry? Basically idolizing something else above God and seeking. Right now, God is what God's saying to the prophet Isaiah to tell the people is that there will be restoration. There will be restoration. Just be obedient. Follow God. And one thing that also touched my heart about this is that in verse 4 it says, "Because you are precious in my sight and honored, and I love you, I will give people in exchange for you and nations instead of your life. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bring descendants from the east and gather from the west." Believe in God. Allow God to restore you. And this couldn't have been more accurate picture of what has happened in my life and why I've come to God and why the Nomadic Nurse Podcast has a faith-based component to it. Why I read the verse of the day of the episode is because in order for me to be restored, I needed God. And I put him first in everything that I do, as much as I know at this present time, because I'm 2 years into my faith, heavily, deeply into my faith. And I'm still learning, and I know I can do better. I am nowhere near perfect. Being a Christian is not just putting myself out there and saying I'm perfect. No. Being a Christian is putting myself out there saying I'm highly imperfect. I require God in my life to be a better human. That is what I'm admitting to the world, identifying myself as a follower of Jesus Christ, a follower of God, a servant of God. I chose this life because not only did it choose me, not only did God call me, but God gave me free will to reciprocate this relationship with him. And I choose to be obedient to him. I remember my encounter with him. I remember the encounters I've had in them over my life, and I didn't even realize what they were. I took them for granted. And by grace, I have found restoration. So, I mean, the faith component of all of this is not something we talk about in healthcare. It's not something we talk about very often in burnout, period. But what we do talk about is all of the other things outside of the spirit. And I'm here to re-emphasize that those things are vital. They're important. It's what it took for me. So another passage that I'd like to share with you in regards to this topic is the following. It's Isaiah 43, verse 18 to 19. And this is very important. As we move on to the next phases of this conversation, I want you to understand this verse. Do not remember the past events. Pay no attention to the things of the old. Look, I'm about to do something new. Even now it is coming. Do you not see it? Indeed, I will make a way in the wilderness, rivers in the desert. This is the deliverance of how rebellious Israel was. This is also the representation of the deliverance that we need in order to be restored. Submit to God and allow him to restore you. And that is the faith component has been a staple in my healing journey. Am I perfect? Nowhere near it. Nowhere near it. The people that are better than me are nowhere near it. No one on this earth is perfect. We are all children of God. So this passage here has really touched my heart. And when we talk about God and his implications in restoration for all of us. So we've spoken about what is burnout. We've spoken about the implications of burnout. Identifying burnout is probably the hardest thing that we can do because we have now adapted ourselves to society and everybody is just burnt out. What does it mean to be burnt out? Let's reiterate this. So burnout, I want to get a proper definition of this for y'all. So burnout defined. This is very interesting how they define burnout here. So in the Oxford Dictionary, burnout is defined as a couple of things. One, reduction of a fuel or a substance to nothing through the use or combustion. 2, failure of an electrical device or component through overheating. 3, physical or mental collapse caused by overwork and stress. It comes down to the same conclusion, no matter what context you like to put it in. At the end of the day, burnout is something that we can all relate to no matter what, no matter if you're a healthcare professional, a patient, a mother, a father, a child. Don't underestimate children. Burnout may present differently with children, but do not underestimate the fact of how children can be burnt out too. This is a very high-paced society. For example, like I was a kid that always was in dance class. I went to some type of activity. My brother was the same thing as well. We all had that type of lifestyle. But then after, I was just very used to it like that. But then when I hit nursing school, my first, I would say, real burnout, if that makes any sense, probably had a burnout of some nature beforehand, but very light. But definitely I had my first recognizable burnout that was identified to me by a teacher. And I was exhausted. I remember the pain in my back because of the muscles that were tight from top. It was so bad. I got a 2-hour massage and I needed to unknot me, like to take out all the knots. It literally, I had to come back in a week for a massage. And it was a sports massage that I was doing. It was crazy. Then in that moment of burnout, what I was doing was I was in nursing school and then I was professionally dancing. So that professionally dancing was paying for nursing school. Keep in mind, my poles were horizontal. It was like, at that time I was doing hip hop dance and, jazz and all that stuff. And I was doing more competitive gigs and stuff. So it's very important that we understand that and how busy I was. So my schedule was like, I would be up at like 4:30 in the morning to go to stage. And then by 4:30 in the morning, I'd go to stage. And then in the evening, I would go to dance. And then I would finish my day at like 10 p.m., get home, shower, everyone's in bed. And then if I was in stage, I was in class. Class started at 8:30. And it was rinse and repeat. And nursing school is already hard as it is. So that was a time in my life where I had my first real burnout, but the level of rest that I received in that moment to recuperate was very, very good. I luckily had some good support, but yeah. My burnout in that moment was the emotional display of it. I had a physical display, but I also, with my back pain and everything, but my emotional display was very much, I was angry. I was very angry. It was very hard for me to express myself without getting frustrated so quickly. And at that time, I thought it was just because I was simply frustrated until somebody pointed out, like, you're really frustrated a lot quicker than you normally are. So because of that, I luckily had some time to take off. Didn't take much time. It was like a weekend and whatnot. Did absolutely nothing. Rescheduled my classes, whatever I had to reschedule, and that was that. But then it came to my second burnout, which was my first real burnout. I'll take a sip of coffee for that one. It's not spiked, I promise. My first big adult burnout, because when I was in nursing school, I was still 19? But my first big adult burnout was in 2014. Yeah. I went through a heavy trauma at that time. I couldn't recover from it. And after that, I tried to do my nursing licensing exam. studying for that was very challenging in itself, because the linking and timing of the trauma to the exam were like literally in the same time zone, like same time, same everything. So it was very, so what ended up happening is I associated my trauma with the exam, and that was really hard to dissociate from. Very, very hard. It took a lot of time. And once that happened, I did have a lot of support. I did have a lot of people help me and help. Obviously, I'm a nurse today, so I passed the exam. But that burnout was traumatizing, to say the least. It's my first one as an adult. I had to be off for work for like 3 months. I was hyper exhausted, hypersensitive, crying all the time. Did not understand why God put me in this place. Did not understand what I was going through. I was a mess. Went to therapy. Regulated my emotions. Physically, I was okay, because I was so hyperactive physically. And it was good for me. And I found a vessel in that. It was actually very tranquil for me to attend dance. It was actually very, very tranquil for me to attend dance. So I was still dancing professionally and competitively at the time, or at least choreography. It was quite a nice, it was a very nice exit from all of the issues that I was having in that moment. Trying to battle all these dark thoughts, trying to battle self-image issues, battling self-worth issues, battling self-worth in the healthcare field issues. Like, it was just a long list of battling and the enemy in my head it's crazy. I didn't even know it at the time, and people, like, some people may not see it as that, but it's, for me, when I had the thoughts that I had in that moment, I needed the Spirit. And that's the reason why afterwards I had so much more progressive burnouts, and the burnouts just either got bigger or stayed the same size. Like, they came back. So during the pandemic, I had a nasty burnout, but that one I didn't take time off. I actually did the opposite, and I worked more. And that I didn't realize what I was doing. I fried myself. Because I felt like I had developed this Messiah complex. I felt like I had to save the world because I had all the resources and all of this and all of that. That is like the wrong mentality. I have a lot of resources. I had a lot of resources. That part didn't change. But not all. And nor does my counterparts have all the resources. But when you head down this road of feeling like you can do it all because you have an advantage in the pandemic to help people. Help people. I make that abundantly clear. Help people. You got to remember that there's people out there that don't have that same mindset. And because you're on this go, 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 you lose discernment. You lose your perspective, your peripheral vision, and you don't realize that somebody who's handing you a solid deal in front of you is actually bringing somebody from around and going in the back. And so when you're in such a burnout to the point where you no longer have peripheral vision and you just start to go, like, you're going light speed ahead, you're going to hit a wall eventually. And this is the hard reality of it, because if it's not going to be in days, if it's not going to be in weeks or months, it's going to be in years. It may even be in decades. But eventually it will happen. Yes, we can counteract and say that the world will always, nothing will ever be perfect. It's not just uphill from here. No, it's not. There will be ups and downs. However, if you've been working, pushing through for so many years, and you just keep and you've just been going light speed ahead, what goes up must come down always. So you have to find a balance in that. And during that time in the pandemic where I was just giving, it's not because I gave to impress anybody. I knew I had a purpose. I knew I had resources that were in the advantage to help others. I knew I had a calling in this moment. And I took advantage of that. In the sense that I wanted to seek and help people. It was just it was simply that. But again, when everybody needs your help and you don't set boundaries, or you don't stop and reflect a little bit, you end up making poor choices eventually. Or if you have a hard time delegating tasks, you will eventually not do the job as well as your colleague, or as well as the person that you've hired to do the task. Because delegation becomes a challenge for you because you have that Messiah complex. And that's the issue here, is that we end up not realizing that we end up not realizing that we can't give any tasks or ask anybody to help us because we feel like we have to carry that burden. And then there was the absolute realization that I had to leave the emergency room, that particular emergency room. I absolutely loved that job. And I realized I hit a huge threshold one day. I was surpassing it. And I went to the gym with my trainer and I was bawling my eyes out. I looked at him and I says, I can't do this anymore. I don't know what to do. And I just remember getting him, crying in his arms. And it was like, that's all I did was just sit there and cry in his arms. He says, I don't know what to do. And I told myself in that moment, it says, it was like a word of affirmation, but I didn't realize is that God heard it as a prayer. And I says, God, I can't move out, but I must move up. How can I move up? And then I got a promotion, and he gave me the moment. He gave me the moment for me to step out of that job and move up in ranking. And I couldn't believe that God gave me that grace. I couldn't believe it. And keep in mind that the other job that I had before in the emergency room, I still miss it. I still love it. There was so much that I learned. There's so much that I did. Like, it doesn't change. My heart doesn't change for that. However, there was a part of me that was so fried and burnt out because of not only the job, but the traumas around the job, the traumas in the job, the traumas everywhere. And you have to stop and realize that your apathy, that's where I headed, is your apathy in the wrong places, such as patient care, is how I realized is that I was burnt out. I started becoming a machine. I started becoming less caring. Yes, the system really wasn't helpful, but there's also the lack of recovery from watching somebody receive CPR and then because they jumped off a building, a stabbing gone wrong, that was brutally murdered. Like, there's things like that really, really get to you. And keep in mind, I'm still in the emergency room, but I deal with these things differently because I still love the emergency. But at the same time, I do have to acknowledge that I need to take this in doses. I need to be creative in what I do on the outside of my time, which is why we're here. I need to be creative on how I heal. So now that we've highlighted the point of identifying burnouts, such as apathy or over empathy, what I mean by empathy, I'm talking about like, maybe empathy is not the right term, but I'm talking about heavy, highly sensitive emotional instability. And that has happened to me as far as the complete apathy. So both sides have happened to me heavily. And I'm here to be a testimony to you that there is restoration in that. There's so much to be restored from. You're not just another number and burnt out from the job, or burnt out because you're a mom, or burnt out because you're a dad, or burnt out because of this. You're not burnt out because you just need to lean on something else and not on your own understanding. It takes a village. Do you have a village? If you don't, how can we get you one? How can we create a community? How can we, what's out there that can help you? And those things are very hard to find. But have faith that you'll find one. You'll find yours. Like, I created Nomadic Nurse Network to be beyond just healthcare resources and business building techniques. I created it to create a network for those who are struggling in the healthcare field with the lack of resources that they have, not because of finances, not because of this, because of they don't have the restoration or the ability to restore themselves, because there's no resources for them in the practical world. There's no resources that their employer can provide. And if there are, there's limits to all of it. So how can we create community, which is a gap that I'm trying to fill? How can we create community to ensure that people can share their stories in a safe and healthy environment so that they can help be healed and be restored from the issues that they deal with in their everyday, that they have a hard time delegating tasks, having a hard time expressing emotions, or having a hard time dealing with a past childhood trauma that they just have not let go of, that's blocking them from their blessing right now. Burnout doesn't just happen because you're an adult. It can happen because of something that has started in your childhood, that has trickled along, that hasn't been dealt with, that just becomes trigger on trigger, and then it just compounds, and then it hits you, and then you're completely fried because you're running on nothing left, because after all these years of being drained because you had a leak at the bottom of your tank because of that one little thing or two little things or a big thing, and it's just making you leak your energy faster and faster until the day that somebody just clocks you just at the right amount for your entire tank to burst. These are things that we have to acknowledge. Now, everyone presents it differently. It's triggered for many different reasons. But I think the best way to acknowledge this is you have to open your heart up that something is not okay. Know what normalcy looks like again, guys. What does it mean to be normal? Think about it. We are accepting of this normalcy to just be apathetic or just be hypersensitive. There's no more in between. There's no more common ground. The fine line for normalcy is just the wedge for normalcy is just getting smaller and smaller. And then to tip over to one side of apathy, to tip over the other side of oversensitive is it's just too easy. And I'm not just talking about the spirit of offense or being offended, or I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about things that trigger you, that is going to make you feel uncomfortable, unsettled, and make you react in ways that are not righteous. that it's going to hurt somebody else and trigger them. And then it becomes this entire cascade of trigger traumas. We just end up doing it to one another. And then we just go on about life like all is okay. But really, do we acknowledge that we are hurt first? Do we acknowledge that we have a log in our eye and even though we're calling out the speck in our neighbors? It's something that we have to acknowledge. And the log in our eye doesn't mean that we're terrible humans. It means that there's something wrong, that we just need to change our hearts and allow God to heal us. So when it comes down to the restoration of everything and coming back to being restored to this amazing point of normalcy, or where God wants you to be, first things first, what I did, I started with my physical health. As soon as I pulled myself out of the environment that was triggering me, that was making me uncomfortable, that needed its space for that moment, because I keep in mind, I didn't completely eliminate working from that department. Like, I still had to go down, visit, make rounds and all that stuff. Like, I still had to do those things. That part didn't change. But for some people who are severely burnt out, that they can't even do that. I was blessed that I was able to still do that. So it wasn't that type of trigger trauma for me. Is there certain things that would affect me? Of course it did. But at the same time, I found a common ground, and there's a level of that where I had to face my fear. So there's a level of that I had to face a fear. But the truth of the matter is, when you pulled yourself out of that environment to the magnitude that you can afford, getting yourself out of that job, getting yourself out of that house, you have to stop and acknowledge and identify what are the physical and the emotional, the mental, the spiritual triggers that you're having. I started with my physical because my spirit, I didn't even think twice about it. So I got the job as the hospital manager. I managed to take a distance from the department. I wasn't involved as hands-on with patients as I used to be, and with certain people as I used to be. I pulled myself out. And I made it very clear to God. I says, God, I don't want to leave this hospital. I love this hospital. I still love that department. It's just I need to come out for a minute. And when I did that, that was a pure answered prayer. That moment was such an answered prayer. I couldn't even, if that moment didn't prove that God was real, I don't know what is. But that was my come to God moment, my come to Jesus moment, as we like to say. Definitely. And I started tackling my health. My weight was crazy. I was almost 300 pounds. And I'm not saying this because of a body weight image. No. I was in so much pain from being in a trauma, from when I was in a trauma case in the resus room. I had to waddle side to side in order to alleviate the back pain that I was having. Like, it's wild to me. It's absolutely barbaric and insane how my back was just in so much pain. And my weight was just carrying it, and I was just gaining weight quicker and quicker. So I had to figure out how to tackle that. I was blessed in that department. I got a doctor in this very difficult healthcare system. I got a doctor that took me under, did wonderful things for me, and put me on a right health regime, listened to me, and I advocated for myself as well. So please be very vigilant and aware that as much as my doctor advocated for me, you have to advocate for yourself. Speak up for yourself. And in those moments, I got the right treatment and I regulated my PCOS, and now it's very much under control. I had an insulin level that was, I think, 500. The normal is like around 100. I had high blood pressure. My cholesterol was trickling up. And what else was I heading down towards? My blood sugar was teetering towards like 10. So it was quite an unfortunate challenge to adjust to, because I had to come to a conclusion that at 30 years old, and I think I was just under 30 at that time, but just under 30 years old, I was in line in the next 5 years to develop cardiac disease. And that was a hard reality if I didn't take advantage of that moment, because any doctor would have saw my case and been like, oh, you're pre-diabetic, or you're starting this, you better watch your diet, you better watch this. My doctor listened to me and said, no, you have PCOS. Manage the PCOS, and then we'll talk about the other things. And lo and behold, I actually started off also with hypothyroidism. I forgot to mention that. I also had hypothyroidism, and all of this cascade was because my cortisol was so high. My fight or flight system was so high that I couldn't regulate it independently, and I needed medications to regulate my insulin levels, I had to also regulate my stress levels at the same time, to then bring down my sympathetic nervous system, to bring down my cortisol levels, to stop the whole cascade with my sugars, to stop the whole cascade with my insulin, to stop the whole cascade of other hormones that were going out of whack, and finally get a grip on my health. That was a journey on its own. That was a 2-year journey on its own. So I want to make that so clear that your health is just as important in this circumstance. Once I was able to regulate that, it made so much more sense for me to regulate my mental. Now, some people, it may need to be the other way around. So keep this in mind. This was my trend because I noticed more physical symptoms at one point, and I was developing apathy. So at that time, I actually had a lot of apathy. So at that time, I didn't think anything was really mentally wrong with me until I regulated my PCOS. And once my hormones started to regulate, my emotions started to regulate, and then I realized, oh, my aunt that passed away like 4 years ago, I'm going to cry about it now. And then that's when I realized that before I barely teared up about traumatic events. And it took me 4 years to actually grieve my aunt. That was the part where I was like, what is wrong with me? So when that moment happened, which was my other come to Jesus moment, that's when I'm like, how is this normal? And that's when it's all because you see one trauma and then you go to the next, and then you see another trauma and then you go to the next, and then you see another and you go to the next. And we do debrief. We did debrief. However, when it gets that busy and we have that much lack of staff, those debriefing moments become extremely challenging. And sometimes we have those moments, sometimes we don't. But also, not to mention that we don't, to go to therapy, for some people, it's very expensive. It's not covered on our nurses' insurance very much, if it is. And it becomes those resources that I remember we used to have when I was, when I first started nursing. We had a kid that drowned. And we couldn't get the kid back. It was a very hard time. We had a lot of nurses that were new parents, just 3-4 years in as being parents. And those parents, all those nurses, I remember. They actually called in a therapist into the department and actually spoke to the nurses one-on-one. And it was, I can't remember, I think it was a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist, one of the people on the team. And it was just so wonderful. My resources at our hospital, we do have a psychiatrist that are willing to talk to staff. But again, limitations, of course, because we have to respect the profession. That's not what that psychiatrist is meant for. The psychiatrist is doing us all a favor and helping us, and because she has a great heart. However, her resources to also, her thing is to care for the psychiatric patients that come in, right? So she becomes pulled because she's trying to help everybody as much as she can. And but unfortunately there has to be some significant limitations so that she can do her job correctly in ways that she's called to do, but also she wants to help the others. But those people require almost as much help as those psychiatric patients in a very different way. by the way, in a very different way. They're not having hallucinations or anything like that. That's very different. They're having different type of mental instabilities that they have to overcome. But with all of this being said, the identification is the biggest step of the restoration. Identification, identifying your health, your physical health. Where is that at? Or start with your mental health. Where is that at? You have to start with one or the other. And it's not just one, wait another 5 months and then start with the other. No, it's literally got to be so synergistic. It's got to be pretty much at the same time. So for me, because I was so apathetic, I started with my physical, and then I realized my mental health. And then this is the part where I can only explain ever so simply. But once I figured out the physical, once I figured out my mental, all of a sudden I still felt a drought, an unrest. I still felt this one moment of unrest. And the only explanation that I have for that was, my spirit. And here's the crazy part about this story is I saw a medium. I saw somebody who did another person of divination. I saw another person that did other things. And it was so funny because each one of those people that I spoke to all told me that I had to start believing in something. They told me, you have to believe in God. And I'm sitting there like, well, the God I know is the one that sent Jesus Christ. That's the one that I know. And it's funny because usually, traditionally speaking, when people say that, you have to believe in a God, or when people of this nature say that you have to believe in God, usually it's not the God that sent Lord Jesus Christ. It's usually another type of God or whatnot. But this case, that was the God that I knew, the one only living God that I knew. And I just started going to church again. I just started developing my faith again. I was feeling convicted because I was having such unrest. And then lo and behold, I get the moment to go to church. I get the moment to feel that unsteadiness and reconnect with God again. That moment was the only reason why my life has changed to the way it is now. It is the moment that has led me to being restored. It was the final cherry on top of the amazing sundae to my healing. And it's not 100%, but that sundae still tastes damn good. That sundae still tastes good. I'm telling you, if I can tell you what has brought me to where I am today, as soon as my physical and my mental health was rationalized a bit, reasoned with, and then we headed down a road of spirit, after that, everything took off into amazing healing. And what do I mean by that? I know that if I kept my life going, I would have probably relapsed with my PCOS. Yeah, I would have been on medications and stuff, but I still would have had that unrest. There's scientific basis that prove that how being in the spirit and having faith actually makes a huge impact on your physical and mental. We talk about it in meditation and yoga and all these other things, but it's also something that applies in Christianity. There's a peace that I have that surpasses all understanding now. I don't know what's happening after May 31st. I don't know if I'm going to have work. I have zero clue what's going to happen. All I know is that I'm heading back to Montreal, and we'll see. But I have such a crazy peace that it doesn't, on earth, it doesn't make sense. As a human, in my flesh, it doesn't make sense. But I have such an understanding. My life is so much more unpredictable, but I walk by so much faith now that I have rest. And I never thought I'd be able to say this so passionately and so truthfully that the Lord will provide. And that's where I'm at right now in my life. And did it change the way I do nursing? I still believe in the medicine that we give to save patients. I still believe in the procedures. The difference in how I care for my patients now that I'm working with God is that my faith, I use my faith now to ease myself to give better care and have discernment and help advocate my patients better. I still give propofol if they need to be intubated. I understand that patients require medical care because we have people that are in the world. And then I get this discussion all the time of I get this discussion a lot of like, well, why can't we just go back to the natural way all the time? Here's the part why we can't. Because we decided to eat trans fats. We decided to eat processed foods. Now we need medications, and now we need regimens. Now we need treatments to heal very specific. We need bigger things to help heal this. Is everybody walking by faith? No. We're in a society where we don't walk by faith. We walk by our own understanding. We walk by feedback of others. We don't walk by faith of God. So that requires practical treatment. But there are stories that I've seen where I'm like, I don't understand how you bounce back. I've heard these stories. I don't understand how at the end of someone's life, how they would just, their dying bodies would just wait for that one family member to be there, and they would feel at ease to leave. Because it's that at that level, y'all, that's the spirit. And that's something before I was saved that I believed in, that I witnessed for myself. And that is the power of faith. Not just my faith, but the faith of the individual. In Matthew chapter 9, verse 21 to 22, a woman who bled for 12 years had faith that if she touched the garment of Jesus when he was walking by, that she will be made well. She touched the garment. She stopped bleeding. Jesus turned around and said, "Your faith has made you well." I believe that my faith has made me well. I'm still human. I will still fail. But I believe my faith has made me well. My faith has restored me. It has slowed me down to stop, discern, reflect, and turn to God in every decision that I make. It has pulled me and said, we are going to do things differently. You did that business so well without me. You did that nursing career so well without me. You did that job so well without me, but now let's do it with me. Let's do that with me and watch how I will restore you, how I'll make your enemies my footstool, how I will bring you to new heights that no human could ever surpass, because your faith has made you well. There's so much in restoration and after your trauma, after your burnout, after your physical impurities, your mental issues, all of it. There is, if you just put faith in your treatment plan, you will be so surprised as to the amount of healing you'll receive. Use me as a testimony for that. There was a time where I did not believe that I could ever be restored. I felt like this was going to be my life because of genetics. God ran those genetics over. I believed that I was going to be sick, obese, full cardiac disease. I believed it because of family history. You can break that family history, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's spiritual. You can do that. This burnout that you're feeling because of something that's happened yesterday or something that's happened as a child, you can be restored if you have faith. Faith is what will pull all your works 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, 1,000 times faster, because God will take you to such supernatural lengths to make you be healed again. And that's why I'm here. And that's why when I had that gentleman that walked into my house, because it was my landlord coming in, he needed a moment of restoration, a seed of hope. And God wants you to plant the seed like how somebody else did, and just continue to plant the seed and create amazing trees. I can continue and go on and on and on about this wonderful topic. But the key components of restoration, of your burnout, of your trauma, of the pain you've been through, whether it be in the job, whether it be from the healthcare system because you've been a patient, or you've been a caregiver, or you're a mother, a father, a child, whoever, a human. Consider your physical health. Consider your mental health. Consider your spiritual health. Look at all three. All three. Do not leave out your spiritual health. And I promise you that you will be made well, because that's God's promise, not mine. And this is the new treatment plan that I implement in my life, and I encourage you to implement it in yours. Call to action, y'all. I want you in the comments to engage and say how this resonated with you, and if you have any other tips and tricks on how this episode resonated with you, or if you have any other tips and tricks that you've done to help with your healing journey, please drop them in the comments. Engage with us. Send us messages. We love to hear from you. And I'm so happy that we had this conversation. Thank you guys so much for always being here. Thank you guys so much for this journey. It is just the beginning, and I'm looking forward to what God has in store for all of us, because God just works through me, in me, to deliver the message. I am just a vessel. I'm just a human. So, thank you all so much for being here. I'm just so happy for all the wonderful things that God has done in my life. And I am not perfect, but I'm still on this journey. And I hope that you accept him as your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, because it was such a blessing in my life. And there's nothing better than a supernatural love that God provides. So with that being said, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for hearing this talk. And thank you Thank you. I'm grateful. I'm just so grateful. And with that being said, see you next time. Bye.